If it feels like God is answering everyone else's prayers more quickly and more often than he's answering yours, remember that comparison with others is the thief of gratitude, but comparison with former self is reason for gratitude. And that perspective and keeping it is really important. And we can see this with the parable of the hired workers in Matthew 20. For the purposes of time, I'm just going to focus on two of the sets of workers in the parable. Those who work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which are the 6 a.m. workers in verse 2, and those who work from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., which are the 5 p.m. workers in verse 6. And we can see in verse 2 that the 6 a.m. workers were offered to work the whole day for a denarius, which is the typical wage for a day labourer. And when that happened, they didn't grumble, they didn't complain, but they were happy to work for that wage, which suggested that they were happy with the offer of a denarius for a day's work. But then comes the problem, and it's the problem we said at the start. The 6 a.m. workers made comparison with others rather than just making comparison with self. Verse 9, the 5 p.m. workers get paid the denarius. So the 6 a.m. workers see that and think, well, okay, we agreed to work for denarius in the first instance, but we're surely going to get paid more because we worked for longer and worked under more difficult conditions. But then they received the denarius they'd agreed to work for and began to grumble against the landowner and said that he was being unfair. But the landowner told them he wasn't being unfair and that he'd given them what they'd agreed to work for and that they shouldn't be envious just because he was generous to those 5 p.m. workers. So the 6 a.m. workers made a comparison with others, being the 5 p.m. workers, and this was the thief of their gratitude. Because rather than being grateful, they ended up being upset, thinking that they'd been treated unfairly because the landowner had been generous to the 5 p.m. workers. However, what they should have done is make a comparison with self in the sense that they should have said, well, we started the day without a denarius, we agreed to work for a denarius and got a denarius, which is an increase, and that would have been reason for gratitude. Think of the denarius as an answered prayer, right? So when you receive the answer to your prayer, you could make a comparison with former self and say, well, I didn't have this answered prayer, now I do, which is reason for gratitude. Or you could do the 6 a.m. worker thing, the wrong thing, which is make a comparison with others. And that's the thief of gratitude. So rather than focusing on how you didn't have something and you do, you say, well, although I have something, it's not fair that the other person also has it, having got it more easily, with less struggle, with less difficulty. And so that will take away your gratitude by stopping you from focusing on why you should be grateful. So when you receive the answers to your prayers, make comparison with former self, not comparison with others, so that you can give God the gratitude he is due. So,